And in 1995, I was in a psychiatric institution with major anxiety disorder, panic disorder, PTSD, and depression. So welcome to the conference. I'm so happy you're here.
And so I don't mean to be flip, I really don't, but it's my story and I'm not ashamed, I'm not embarrassed. It's why I'm here with you today.
I am Tami West, and that is my story. Welcome to Consider Yourself Hugged, a place to find comfort and support as you navigate your mental and emotional well-being. So sit back and relax, unless you're driving, and get ready for this week's hug. Are we good?
We are good. I almost hit leave meeting instead of okay to the recording in progress. So that tells you kind of like where I am today. So everyone may have to just overlook me a little bit.
I can't tell you how many times I've done that in our team meetings that I get onto with, the EAP that I work with. I can't tell you how many times I've done that, and they all just crack up when I come back. I'm like, sorry.
Yeah.
I've never done
it's so easy to do. Yeah.
Well, here we are. We finished our positive psychology, and Michelle knows, and some of you might know, that I took the quiz. Woo! Doesn't Zoom sometimes every once in a while on Zoom, either we'll say something or do something and confetti will go up?
That is a setting, and I don't know how to.
But how do I make it happen? That. Like, let's say all the things. Congratulations. No. Woohoo! No. Yep. Okay. Oh, you did that.
I did that. I thought maybe that would do it, but it didn't. I don't really know. How do I get that off?
I don't know. YouTube. If you're listening, you're like, what are you doing? If you're watching, you're like, this is not hard, people. Just leave it up. I like it. Michelle put a
now that says no. Okay, it's gone.
Okay. Michelle, since we couldn't get the whatever it is to work, Michelle put one of those little party hat emojis up there. But yeah, so I took the quiz, and now I have my certificate. And you asked me, I think before, if it was hard, and it wasn't, but it was just longer than I thought it would be. So it was a bunch of like questions, like explain this, and what would you tell somebody about this, and what is the use of this assessment, and why would you do this, and so anyway, I did that, and I thought I was done. And then there were 25 more like multiple choice questions, but I feel like it was fitting for what we did.
Okay.
I didn't feel like it was too hard or too easy, or I thought it was good. So now,
congratulations. That is wonderful.
Thank you. I know. And then Michelle and I think you all know we're going to do another. There's 2 that we can do, and we said we were going to do sleep, but we're not going to do another one of those coaching type series till after the first of the year, because Michelle had a fabulous idea for us to do now. You're really the reason we're doing this, so you say what we're doing between now and.
We are going to do a series on like having the best possible mental health during the holidays. Holidays are a joyous time, but they can also be difficult in certain ways. So we're going to look at some different things and talk about positive ways to improve your mental health through the holidays.
Yeah. And we don't have all of the topics laid out. I think we talked about, so we're going to do one a week for 6 weeks. And that takes us up to like Christmas and New Year's are both on Wednesdays, which are podcast day. So we'll probably just do some sort of a fun little message to put out like on the holidays. But 6 weeks is what we have before, as far as, we don't know exactly what holidays you celebrate, but Thanksgiving, New Year's, Christmas, and Hanukkah, whatever else is in there, I don't know. But 6 weeks is what we're doing. And it started too, backing up a little bit further. Michelle was saying when we talked about what we were going to do next about maybe doing something on depression, which is what we're going to do today. But we realized, looking back, we've never done, whether it was Michelle and me together, or when Gracie was with us, or by myself, I don't think we've ever done an episode on depression. How can that be?
I don't know.
All right. Well, if we have, and I didn't see it, because I looked up somebody, you all tell us. You can be like, what's wrong with you? Yes, you did one. You did one. But I don't have note that we did one. So that's what we're going to do today.
I think we've talked about it here and there before, but I don't remember an entire episode devoted just to um, depression. And really, we're talking about understanding depression and like navigating that for yourself, for family, for friends during the holidays.
Yeah. And do you remember like what it was about when we had this conversation a week or two ago about doing depression? I feel like there was a reason that you brought it up.
I think we were in a conversation about how easily misunderstood depression can be because there's so many different things. There's a huge spectrum of what we call depression.
Mm.
And so, like, there's everything from situational depression, where some really hard things are happening, to clinical depression and all of the above. Clinical depression meaning like everything, with clinical depression, everything can be going perfect in your life. And you still have those days where you wake up and the heaviness is
Mhm.
just overwhelming and it's hard to get out of bed and it's hard to see hope, even in the absence of stressors. And so, like, understanding that it's not necessarily a one size fits all
Mm.
on how to treat that or how to be a support for that or give advice for that.
What you just said, as always, there's always something powerful. Um, Everything may be going great in your life, and you still have that sense of sadness. And then also, when you said situational, and depression is even one of the stages of grief, which is related to a situation. Like you have a reason to be feeling that immense sense of sadness, but sometimes there doesn't seem to be a reason and it's still there.
Yes, and I think it's sometimes hard for someone who hasn't struggled with depression to understand that. And we have talked before. We've um, laughed, joked, not made light of it, but you kind of have to take it as it comes. Like my sister's 23andMe results, where like she got results that in our family, 76 out of 100 people, like genealogy wise, that had submitted had been diagnosed with depression. I mean, we knew that depression runs very strongly in our family, and she has struggled really from quite a young age with depression, not really understanding exactly what it was. My brother struggled with depression, and I struggle with depression. Mine so far has been fairly mild, but I have people in my life, my sister, my son, and they both give me permission to talk about this that really struggle, that have like more moderate to severe clinical depression. And
Mhm.
they do all different kinds of things in addition to therapy, medication, and there are still good days and bad days. And so, you know, understanding like how hard sometimes people are fighting just to have an okay day, I think is important.
Would you mind? I'm trying to decide which direction I want to go with what you just said. Well, first of all, let me just mention I didn't send this to you, but I printed this out before we got on because we didn't have anything in our notes that we put together to talk today about genetics. And there's just so much. I mean, there's environment, there's genetics, but what Michelle was talking about is the 23andMe test just shows how many people with her sister's genetic makeup would be diagnosed. But there are some studies that indicate genetics can play 40 to 50%. Again, that doesn't, there's the environment as well as to whether that will necessarily manifest stress, trauma, life events, all of those things. Um, and then I'm going to ask you in a minute if you'd be willing to share the donut story. But so as Michelle and I were talking you don't know how much this, I mean, I laughed at the time, but you don't know how much I just have thought about it. A few weeks ago, I think it was on, I don't know if we were recording or just talking, but I said to Michelle, I said, you know, those times when you were worrying and then you stopped and then you were like, what was I just worrying about? And then you're worried about that. And Michelle said, no. And here's what struck me. Okay, going back to what you said. Michelle has this genetic. She can point to people in her family who have struggled, been diagnosed with depression. She battles depression. Me, my diagnoses in the psych hospital were PTSD, anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and depression. I never talk about my depression because I didn't really I didn't really think about it very much because the anxiety. So now let's go back. My 23andMe shows that 69 people out of 100 with my genetics will be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. So it's like we both have mental health struggles in our life, but to me, that's like, am I making any sense? Like it just struck me
Yes, yeah,
how
that
our
like
battles are a little different.
yeah, and you see it through the lens of what your battle is.
Yeah. And when I think about my diagnoses, so here's what I did. And then I want to ask you, are you going to share the donut story? Because I
Yeah,
think,
absolutely,
okay.
I will.
So, psych hospital, right? So, as I trace it, it's like, okay, I got this negative feedback, which was so traumatic to me. That's, if you follow us, you know that story, but that's sort of what precipitated the hospital, right? Negative feedback, PTSD, right? I couldn't deal with that. It was just too much. The anxiety over can I go back in? What will I do? What's going to happen to my life? And then, people, they're going to be so disappointed in me, everybody. And then the panic attacks sit in. And then as all of that comes to a head, I'm thinking that the depression, because I remember there were weeks where I didn't get out of bed. I was crying. I was hopeless. I was helpless. But I never really thought about that in light of depression because I don't know, I was focused on so much of the other stuff. But it was situational for me. Like depression is not something overall that I battle. Now it's the anxiety.
Yeah,
So
that makes
that's
yeah,
kind of how I
absolutely.
wrapped it around my head.
And so, and I've shared this story before, but just in context of what we're talking about, I knowing like that there was a strong family history of depression, have always kind of like thought, okay, I'm gonna watch for it. If ever I need medication, anything like that, I absolutely 100% open to that. And what Tammy's talking about with the donut
Wait,
story.
can I interject though?
Sure.
Didn't you say you would be, if you want me to take this out, I will, but didn't you say you would be open to it if you couldn't function anymore?
That yes, and like that was kind of the
Like
like what
that
I
was
was
the
looking
bar
at.
you
Like,
set?
yes, I mean, because like looking at individuals struggling with depression, I knew how debilitating it could be. And so in my mind, what debilitating, I can't apparently can't talk today, what debilitating depression looked like was set for me at a certain bar. And I did have a lot going on. This is a few years ago. I had a lot going on. My dad had terminal cancer. Um, there was a couple of different family things going on, but the depression, the sadness was getting worse and worse, and the not really being able to see what the future looked like, and like a sense of hopelessness that kind of had set in. And I can remember being in line at Krispy Kreme donuts, and I love Krispy Kreme donuts. There's nothing against Krispy
The
Kreme
hot
donuts.
light? What's the hot light on?
Yes. Yes,
Wow.
yes, yes. In fact, it was. And I'm sitting there and I am crying, and I'm not exactly sure why. And you very easily could have been like, well, this is going on, that's going on, that's what's going on. But the aha moment was when some thoughts set in that I knew were not thoughts that are typical for me. It was things like, oh, this is hopeless. You know, you'd be, better off if you weren't here. And I'm like, oh, whoa, like that is absolutely like not me or something that is typical for me. And that was kind of my aha moment. And I was still functioning. I was still getting up. There was never a time where I couldn't get out of bed. There was never a time when I called out of work or anything like that. But the reality is, why wait to that point
Mm-hmm.
in regards to like, did I want to feel that way? I mean, it was a slow progression, but just because it didn't progress to the level that I had seen depression
Mm-hmm.
progress, that didn't mean I wasn't struggling or that it wasn't actually depression or that I didn't need to do something about it.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's kind of a matter of, whether you're to a point where you can't get out of bed or not, like, how much do you want to struggle?
And
Like,
that's,
yeah.
and you're right. We have shared this, I don't know, a while back, but you said that to me as well. You helped me as well because we both use the phrase holistic mental health, and we use the phrase for some, for others, for you, for some people who are feeling depressed, self-help works. For others, they need something more. They need something professional, and it's up to you to know where you are. And like Michelle has said many times before, she knows that for me anyway, I don't always I always feel like people already know information. I'm like, well, that's basic. People already know that. But that's not true, first of all. And Michelle and I are both blessed, honored, whatever, to work in a field where we know what to look for and we know what's available out there and we know how things can progress. But not everybody's in that space. And so that's,
Well, and I think that even when kind of like what I was talking about, like you can wait longer than you probably should. And like I knew like that mild depression was a struggle. And at that time, kind of as you know, I was doing all the things. I was protecting my sleep, I was exercising, um, trying to get enough sunlight.
which are really good things.
Yes.
You should try.
Even like, and I had to even like started in therapy when I found out that my dad had terminal cancer because I knew that grief is something that could be a real struggle for me. Um, and I was doing all of those things. And so when I talk about the aha moment, it was the aha moment where it's like, okay, I need to start medication for this. This is the time. It isn't, you know, me not getting out of bed. It's okay. The struggle is enough.
Yeah.
It's time.
You had those thoughts and you knew that that was not a good place to be.
Right. It just wasn't characteristic of me. So, and not true. I mean, and that's the thing that you and I have said before. It's like depression, anxiety, they lie to you.
They do.
Yeah. Your brain tells you things that just aren't true. And sometimes it gets harder and harder to fight off those things that aren't true.
And you who are listening and watching, you are not alone. What Michelle and I wanted to do today, other than share a little bit, especially of Michelle's story, just to let you know that, we feel this. If you're struggling, we feel this and we want to be there for you. But we wanted to just talk a little bit about the fact that you're not alone, some statistics, some things to look for, why it's worse during the holidays, and then just some tips. And we don't usually read statistics, but when I do webinars for the EAP program, people are oftentimes really surprised. And this is a weird way to say this, but there's something about knowing that you're not alone. The research shows that when we know that there's a problem that other people, in fact, a lot of other people struggle with, that's an unfortunate thing. But at the same time, we realize we're not alone. And so I don't know, these are the latest statistics that I found, that lifetime depression rates, this is in 2023, just overall in all the statistics, is about 29%. If you take overall the statistics that we have, current rates, which I think was 2023 data, are at almost 18%. Yeah, almost 18%. It's higher for, wait a minute, I have the wrong, let me pull my actual, oh, here we go. Women and adults have seen the most increases. Over a third of women, 36.7%, report a lifetime diagnosis of depression compared with 20% of men. Does that surprise you? I mean, it doesn't surprise me.
So it doesn't surprise me. I think there's a lot of factors that go into that in terms of like, I think women are a little more open to seeking help.
Right. Right. And we'll post all these. There's a lot. We'll post them. We're not going to go over all of them, but Hispanic and Black adults are experiencing rising rates, geographic variability across the country, and then, of course, the impact of the pandemic, mental health issues, job loss, social isolation. So it's a thing. You are not alone. You are definitely not alone. So do you want to talk a little bit about like how to recognize it, Michelle, some symptoms?
Yeah. So I'm just kind of starting out. And again, as we mentioned, huge spectrum of things that are considered depression.
Oh,
And
disclaimer. We should make a big disclaimer today that we are not here to diagnose or give you specific advice. This is not therapy or counseling. It's general, it's overview, but as always, we will put a lot of resources in the show notes. So
yes.
Sorry about that. Meant to say it. Okay, go ahead.
So a lot of things considered to depression, and there's not a one size fits all, but the most important thing we want to kind of get across is that support and love for one another when somebody is struggling is never a bad thing. And so regardless of what end of the spectrum someone is on, the struggle is real when it comes to depression. And we know that during the holidays, whether, we have Thanksgiving coming up, all the different holiday seasons in December, Christmas, or like Tami said, whatever holidays that you are celebrating, it brings with it some complexities. It brings with it
Yes.
some struggles that we don't necessarily see the rest of the year. It also brings with it expectations of what we think things are going to be like, expectations of what others think it's going to be like. And sometimes those don't always turn out exactly right. I mean, let's be honest. When do expectations like completely turn out the way?
No, not usually.
Yeah. And so that absolutely can have an impact. But we're going to talk just for a few minutes on some signs that would indicate that maybe some other resources, some outside help could be important. And this is one of the things that I know that Tami also teaches in mental health first aid, which is an amazing program if you haven't or if you're not familiar with it. And so with depression, for clinical depression, there are different symptoms and so forth that are considered like benchmarks for that. And it could be like feeling really sad, having a really low mood. It can also look like feeling really irritable at times, which is kind of out of character. It can also feel like not feeling much of anything, where when even like positive things are happening and you should be happy and excited, that you're not. Or even negative things, if negative things are happening and you're not feeling anything, that actually, a lot of people don't know that could be a symptom of depression as well. It can affect your motivation to want to get up and do things, your energy level, your concentration. Like, it can cause you to sleep too much or not enough. It can change your appetite. Some people have an increase in appetite, some people have a decrease in appetite. It can create just a real sense of hopelessness. And like I was mentioning before, not being able to see like the future, not have forward thinking. It can cause thoughts of self-injury and even suicidal thoughts. And so, like diagnostic wise, like it takes a certain amount of those symptoms before someone's diagnosed with major depressive disorder and so forth. But again, we're looking at it from the perspective of the struggle.
Yeah.
Like if someone is struggling, that deserves attention. And so, like when you look at all of those different things and you look at like how long those things are lasting, then that's something that you would pay attention to. That would kind of be a benchmark of, okay, is it time at this point for XYZ intervention?
A lot of I was just making, I don't know if this is a good analogy to make or a visual to make, but when you think about the symptoms of depression, if someone doesn't understand, they could look at this as some of the symptoms as just laziness or
Oh,
just not taking enough initiative or not, right? Versus, I think when you look at somebody with anxiety, sometimes people with anxiety are move, 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 and they're fearful, fearful, fearful. Sometimes even like it's a more active kind of worrying and obsessing. And so it looks quite a bit different. Is that
yes.
safe to
Yeah,
say?
absolutely. I think if it's something you've never experienced, it's really difficult to understand why someone won't just
Just
get
get
up
up,
and change their life. Yeah, absolutely.
pull yourself
One
up
of
by
the,
your bootstraps, right?
and it's like the struggle of how difficult it is to just complete a task when someone is struggling with severe depression is hard to understand if you haven't been there. One of the interventions for depression is um, like when the person is ready or able to do so, having like very, very short things be goals or tasks. So if it is like when I remember being in a training and the therapist saying, if the person just folds 3 towels from a basket of towels that need to be folded that day, that's a positive and can count towards that goal list. And so, when someone is struggling with depression, I think the tricky part is things can get further and further behind, and then the list of things that need to be done can grow and grow and grow, and they become more and more overwhelming. And so, like even when the person starts feeling better, they're still faced with this now overwhelming amount of things that need to be done, and that's pretty tricky to navigate.
I am just now having a little bit of compassion for my mother who passed in 2016. And again, if you've been following for a while, you know that story, but she struggled with debilitating depression. So even though we talked about the genetics, it doesn't mean that every single person's going to have the same, mental health issue. Hers was debilitating depression, but you might know that we grew up in filth and poverty, and my mother never took care of business, never cleaned. It was awful, and I hated her for it and resented her for it. And that was part of my perfectionism. And so I guess I'm saying this to say what you're saying would have been hard for me to hear 10 years ago. That if my mom only folded 3 towels, I would have just not. And the reason is because it affected me so profoundly. But hearing you even talk about it makes sense because I don't even know what her waves of depression were like or when she felt better or when she felt worse, but it was so bad in our house that I can imagine even if she was feeling a little bit better. And I can remember some days where she would seem a little more motivated, but how long did that last and how much could she get done? Um, so yeah, that gives me a little bit of insight. But it has to be hard. Like if you're watching or listening because you have someone in your life who's depressed, if it's like profoundly affecting you, you need help too. you know, all of you need help. So that was interesting, Michelle.
Yeah, and I think that you make a good point that like even though like even understanding it doesn't make it easy.
No.
So
I
it
wouldn't have
doesn't
even
get
have wanted
easy
to understand it, honestly. Like if you
because
again
the impact was too great
too
on.
great. And maybe not 10 years, maybe 15 or 20 years, but especially growing up as a young adult or when I was still living at home. No, I would have just thought you were telling me that that was a crock of crap and because I just wasn't equipped. And I think that's why we both are so passionate about this is we're hoping to at least help equip people with some knowledge and some things that will help.
I mean, we know that like statistically, depression is the leading cause of disability in the world. I mean, that is
And we need to put
well
that.
documented. And but again, like when you're the person, when you're the loved one, or when you're the person struggling, that statistic doesn't really
Right.
um right. I mean,
That
it,
statistic does not clean out the cat boxes that have been
it,
sitting
it does not.
for six
Absolutely,
months.
absolutely. Or, your loved one to participate in different things. It doesn't. But I mean it's a real, it's a very real
It
thing.
is. And we will put, again, as a general thing, we'll put like a symptom checklist, not as a diagnostic tool, but maybe as a place. We'll put all of the links to help you like look at your symptoms or a loved one. Do you want to talk anything more about like symptoms or do we want to talk about things to do?
I think that that before we move on, I definitely want to say that if the symptoms are for you or your loved one self-injury or suicidal thoughts, that we're going to post information for like crisis information.
Mhm.
We don't want to just like breeze over that.
No, no. So yes, as we will put, I mean, 911 is always the go-to if there is imminent danger, of potential suicide or self-harm. And then 988, this is something Michelle helped me with years ago, which is a whole nother story, but I had someone threatening suicide and I didn't even know who this person was. Do you remember this? I was in California
Do. I
and
do. Yeah.
it was someone I had met in a conference and they were writing me on Messenger. It was awful. And Michelle referred me to what is now 988 and they help tremendously. So the thing though that I want to say about 988 is people call it the suicide prevention line, and it is, but it's and crisis. Like suicide prevention and crisis hotline. So if you think that you're not sure, for yourself, you might be having, like Michelle said, possible thoughts of self-harm or suicidal thoughts. 988 is there for you, but also it's there for you if you're trying to help someone else. So it's a good one to call. We'll post
Absolutely.
all of that. And if you have an EAP, which some of you may not, some of you may, we'll put information about that kind of thing too. Okay. What do you think? Tips and tools for treatment or just things to try? Like if you want to talk about like treatment options, then I can just talk about maybe some tips for coping over the holidays.
Yes, absolutely.
How's that sound?
So the with the like treatment options tips kind of like go hand in hand, and again we're focusing kind of on the holidays, but as far as like treatment options for depression, as we mentioned, we're not giving advice as far as treatment options, but there is a wide range of things that can be helpful, everything from um, therapy, medication, um, like I had mentioned, um, exercise, sleep is very important. I was able to manage kind of mild depression for a long time by like making sure like exercise is really important for me, sleep is really important for me, and so forth. So there is a huge range of treatment options, and not everything is right for everyone. And so I think I'd say, being kind to one another about what is being chosen. So, like, I know I've heard so many conversations of like, I didn't need therapy and I don't understand why they need therapy, or like, I didn't need medication. I don't understand why they need medication. They should just do this and this. That's what worked for me. Like, understanding that everybody's different, everybody's genetic makeup is different, everyone's situation is different. What works for them could very likely be different. So just being kind to that person and understanding about where they are can make a huge difference. And there's like um I don't know what you call it, like a picture going around. Is it GIF, meme? I don't, it's not really,
I
is a
don't know
meme
what they're
always
called.
funny? I don't
I
know.
I always call them memes, but I don't know if that's right. So,
But it's like two bears hugging, and it said, "Don't give someone a lecture that really needs a hug."
oh,
Yeah, and so sometimes like the hug is what is really
you send that to
needed.
me,
And
okay?
okay,
If you can find
I
it.
always mention these things and then I can't find them, but I'll do my best
Okay, I
to
wrote it down. We'll both
find
look
it.
for it because that would be a
Okay.
beautiful picture to have.
And so, like, making time for these things during the holidays can be more difficult because people are very, very busy. But at the same time, remembering that, like, not taking care of yourself and emptying your cup so you can have that bandwidth isn't the answer.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the cup. We've talked before about like whether it be your when I learned it, it was called the stress cup.
It's
So I need,
okay.
okay, okay.
I
So
love that.
like,
I love that Michelle is so tuned to my aversion to the word stress, but it's fine. Go ahead.
so like with the stress cup, like if you think about a cup and like as your stresses come along and they just fill up the cup more and more. And what usually happens is when they get to the top of the cup, one little bitty thing, even if it's not a huge stressor, can cause things to spill or just to go over the top. And so we have to do things to empty our cup so that we don't have that
Yeah.
spill or eruption. And so whether that is talking with friends, therapy, taking a walk, whatever things you need, it's still important when depression is a struggle to make time for those things, regardless of how busy you are with the holidays.
Yeah.
I mean,
Don't take
it's
those
essential.
out. Don't take those things out
Yeah,
of your
absolutely.
routine.
Yeah. And, schedule, like, I think we forget sometimes that we really are to some degree in charge of our own schedule. And so, like, obviously, there's work, but in terms of planning holiday schedule, I think sometimes we forget it's okay to say no, or to say, we're coming for an hour, or to say, you know, we can't do this, but we can do this. And it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, you aren't, necessarily bound to like a schedule that is not doable for you mental health wise.
Yeah. We're grown people.
Right.
We can do whatever we want.
Mm.
And I wanted to throw in too when you talked about people who say, well, I just did this. I don't know why they can't, just do that. And Michelle and I are both, Jesus following Christian women. So we absolutely believe in prayer and divine healing and all those things. But when people say just pray more, um, that's God may have taken someone's depression and healed it or diminished it, or and we don't know how God works, but if that may not happen in someone else. And it doesn't mean their prayers aren't working or they're not praying hard enough. It just means prayer can be part of it, but God has put other things in their world to help them as well. So just wanted to put that in there too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really important.
Yeah. Okay. So,
And we will have resources, as Tammy mentioned, of all of those things that, like resource wise.
right.
So we're not going to today like go into detail of each and every one of those and how they help, but all the resources we can
Yeah.
share that.
I hope that you all did listen to the positive psychology series. And if you didn't, I'd encourage you to do that because one of the powerful things was Michelle mentioning that. So, for like us, we both work in the world of mental health. And so you would think that because we know all the things, well, okay, then we'll be healthy. But knowing all the things is not helpful. It's doing all the things. And so Michelle used that word being, um, oh, what did you say? Was it just engaged?
Intentional.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually doing them. And I don't know about you. We didn't talk about this, Michelle, but the series is over. Does that mean we can stop doing those things because we
No.
engaged in them?
No,
Oh,
absolutely not. And like I inserted here the comment about schedule because I think I can be so guilty of that. I can be guilty of creating a schedule for myself that isn't good for myself. And so like it's even if you know these things, like we're not reinventing the wheel with these resources, they're out there,
yeah.
but it really is like giving yourself permission to do what you need to do for your own mental health.
And, as we relate that to the holidays, and I think that's the last thing, because that's really what this is all about. Um, I want to start with the most important thing really is asking yourself what your holiday is all about. I mean, that really is foundational. And
It's so good. Yes.
I don't mind sharing every time I say, I just turned 60. I can't believe it. And so part of that, comes the body aches and the gray hair, which I've embraced and all those things, but hopefully it's also come with wisdom and raising 8 kids. And I was one of those people. So just to tell you, because of the way we were raised with, so backing up, think about what the message has been to you for your whole life about that holiday. So, for example, Christmas. We would get up, we grew up in poverty, and my dad left when I was a child. But during those years when we were young, like memory years, like 5 to 10, maybe when he was still home, we would get up on Christmas morning and the room would be filled with presents. So that was the expectation. Well, then I realized as a young adult that they went into debt to do this. I'm not doing that with my family. And so I don't, Christmas up until a few years ago, I kind of hated it because there was so much pressure, so much pressure. So when Michelle talked about things are going great, like holidays are supposed to be happy, and yet you're still feeling sad. And part of that might be the expectations and the financial strain and who am I going to see in the family and all of this. So think about the message that you were given growing up. Yours might have been super positive, maybe not. But then as an adult, make that decision. Like, what is this holiday about? And have that conversation with your family. Most of the time, if you engage your family in what are we doing this year? What should our budget be? How do we want to plan our calendar? And try to really like enjoy it. I mean, use paper plates if that, what are the choices? Do you enjoy setting up 15 Christmas trees? Or does your family run away for a week because you're so, anxious about it the whole time you do it? Or do you just fall into this sense of sadness because you feel like you could never live up to the expectations? I feel like we are here to say, where do those expectations come from? Are they self-imposed? And does it give you joy during the holidays? And if it doesn't, release it. But talk to your family about why you're releasing it, because you want the memories, you want the joy. You don't want to go into debt. You don't want to try to compare yourself. Michelle knows I have a group of friends, and like a group of couple friends, and the women are very creative. And one of them, everyone's always praising her house, and it's beautiful. But then when they come to my house, they don't praise it. And so it would be easy for me to be like, oh, But I have let that go. I'm like, that's not where I get my identity from, is whether I've decorated perfectly for the holidays. And I'm not saying anything negative about her, because her house is beautiful and wonderful, but it's just not something that I'm going to do. The finances, I don't really have the finances or the time. And I just put up enough that it makes me happy. So those are my suggestions over the holidays.
Like being able to appreciate someone else's gift without diminishing your own gifts.
Write that down. Wait, say it
Okay.
again. Appreciate someone else's gift.
Without it diminishing your gifts.
Ah, that is perfect. Okay, I wrote it down. And those are the things that we wrote down as far as, I put those all into just one big thing, but setting realistic expectations, pacing yourself by using that calendar, and using a calendar, like Michelle said, is going to help you visualize that and maybe not overplan. If you just write it down on sticky notes everywhere, then you may not realize how much you've committed to. Staying connected, as much as you feel comfortable with. Michelle, we should post your article about grieving during the holidays,
Okay.
because one of the things Michelle talked about is that if the first year after someone passes, you just want to lie on the sofa, you have to make decisions based on what's best for you. But staying connected, that's kind of what the holidays are about. Engaging in activities that bring you and your family joy. Be careful about what you eat and drink over the holidays, because, like Michelle said, those lifestyle things can affect your mental health. Practice self-care. Don't let go of the things that you learned during our positive psychology time together. Take your walks, do your exercise. It's not a time to give that up. It's a time to ramp that up. And then finally, remembering to seek professional help. And there's absolutely no shame in that. Like, why wouldn't we? That's what Michelle said to me. We said it to each other during the pandemics. Like, why wouldn't you go get the help that you need? Why? And we realize there are barriers that keep people from doing that, but we want to be here to take those change and just rip them off. So that's what I have.
Wonderful, wonderful advice. And you had mentioned, this is something that I think a lot of people don't know. You mentioned like being careful about what you eat and drink. When we're talking about alcohol and depression, so alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. And so, like, I worked with a really wonderful woman who had gotten her MD PhD, and her PhD was in like substance use recovery. And so I'll never forget.
You never forget?
Yeah, I'll never forget her telling us because she did part of my training, that one standard size serving of alcohol will counteract the antidepressant that day.
Really?
So if you're on an antidepressant and you're drinking alcohol, the alcohol is probably overpowering the antidepressant. And so, obviously you're gonna have a resurgence of depression.
Wow.
And if you're drinking while on an antidepressant, it's likely the antidepressant's probably not helping much because it can't overpower the central nervous system depressant effect of the alcohol.
Interesting. Because, you see, don't drink while you're on antidepressants, but I don't know that I've ever really, like, I'm not really a drinker, the occasional glass of wine or something, but I didn't really think about it that way as far as it, because it is, right? And people drinking alcohol will temporarily allow your brain to go, oh, okay. I mean, it might, but over the long haul, that's,
Yeah. How do you feel the next day?
yeah. And it
And
won't help you
yeah.
sleep well and all the things. So just be careful. Take care of yourself. All right. Are we good?
I think so.
Okay. Well, we don't know exactly what the topics will be coming up. It'll be a surprise every week. I mean, a good surprise. We just really want to put time every time we finish one episode and figure out what are people needing over the holidays. But if you have ideas, definitely send them in. There's so much to talk about as far as your mental health over the holidays. So send in your questions, your thoughts. If you have more ideas about resources for depression, definitely let us know. And continue, please, to rate, review, download, follow us on social media. All of that is in the show notes. And until we see you next time, consider
yourself
hacked.
hacked.